The phone rang once, then again, and again. Each time the dispatcher picked up, and each time there was nothing, just silence, not a breath, not a word, just a faint electric hiss and the sense that someone or something was on the other end, listening or trying to speak. The calls kept coming, 5 in total, all from the same number. And that number traced back to a house in San Pedro, California, a house where, according to records, no one should have been alive, because the woman who lived there had been dead for hours. Her name was Ruth Lucille Snyder. And this is what happened. Ruth was 74, a widow for over a decade. She lived alone in a quiet neighborhood near the waterfront, a narrow bungalow shaded by eucalyptus trees with wind chimes that clinked softly in the afternoon breeze. Neighbors described her as gentle, polite, and unfailingly neat. Her lawn was always trimmed, her trash cans always brought in on time. She had no children, no family nearby, just her and the soft ticking of a clock in her living room. She liked puzzles, gardening, watching old movies. She was the kind of person who might disappear from the world, and it would take a few days before anyone noticed. But someone did notice, or something did. On the night of November 17th, 1981, just after midnight, dispatchers at the San Pedro Emergency Call Center began receiving a series of 911 calls. Each was logged separately, each from the same landline. But every time they answered, there was silence. Not a pocket dial, not static. A complete connection, open line, no hang-up, but no sound. That wouldn't have raised alarms by itself. Mistakes happen. Wiring can glitch. But the address those calls came from belonged to Ruth Snyder. And after the third call in 15 minutes, officers were sent to perform a welfare check. The patrol car pulled up to a quiet street lined with parked cars and curtained windows. Ruth's porch light was on. There was no sign of struggle, no broken windows, no motion inside. They knocked. No answer. They called out. Silence. After 10 minutes, they radioed for permission and forced the door. Inside, the house was quiet, chilly, still. The living room was tidy. A half-drunk cup of tea sat on a coaster beside the recliner. The television was off. A crossword lay unfinished on the coffee table. There were no signs of a break-in, but when they reached the back bedroom, they found her. Ruth was lying on her back, fully clothed, atop the covers of her neatly made bed. Her hands were at her sides, her eyes open, her skin already cool to the touch. The coroner later estimated she'd been dead for nearly 5 hours. Strangulation. No bruises on the arms or signs of a struggle, no sign of sexual assault or robbery. Her purse was untouched. The doors were locked from the inside, and in the hallway, resting on the receiver cradle, was the rotary phone, the one that had been used to call 911 5 times. This is where the story begins to shift, from the eerie to the inexplicable, because the phone in Ruth's home wasn't the kind that could redial or autocall. It was a 1960s Western Electric rotary model. To make a call, you had to physically pick it up, place your finger in the holes, and rotate the dial 911, 3 times per call, 5 calls total, 15 digits. All manually dialed. But Ruth had been dead, her limbs stiff, her blood pooled, for hours before the first call was logged. So who made the calls? Some thought maybe it was the killer. A sick game. But if so, why call emergency services? Why not flee? There was no evidence anyone had broken in or out. The windows were locked, no footprints in the soil outside, no fingerprints except Ruth's. Police interviewed neighbors. No one had seen anything unusual. No strange vehicles. No sounds in the night. A few thought they heard the wind chimes shake, but nothing else. No cries, no screams. And yet, the calls kept coming. Even as police processed the scene, another call came through to dispatch. From the same number, This time, the dispatcher said she heard something faint, like soft breathing, labored, rhythmic. The call lasted 17 seconds, then silence, then a click. Technicians from Pacific Bell were called in to inspect the line. They tested voltage, checked the junction box, traced the wires back to the pole. Everything checked out. The line was operational, not crossed, not compromised. There was no mechanical reason for the calls. In fact, when they disconnected the line at the pole to test it again, the phone still rang through to dispatch one last time. After that, nothing. Police labeled it a technical anomaly. They blamed it on faulty wiring, maybe a residual connection, maybe someone spoofing the number, though in 1981, that would have required a switchboard and specialized gear. Others weren't so sure. One officer, who had been first on the scene, told a colleague that he felt something inside the house. Not a presence, not quite, but a pressure, like someone was watching. He couldn't explain it, but he wouldn't step past the bedroom door. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death as manual strangulation. No defensive wounds, no drugs in her system, no alcohol, no signs of trauma beyond the bruising around her neck, no semen, no signs of a break-in. Whoever did it had either walked right in or had never left. A suspect was never named. The case went cold, but not everyone forgot. A year later, a local reporter named Caroline DeWitt began compiling notes on strange emergency call incidents. One, logged in her file, referenced multiple blank 911 calls traced to a deceased individual. She followed the trail back to Ruth's death, and what she found unnerved her. In the dispatcher's log for that night, there was a sixth call, time-stamped 6 hours after Ruth's body had been taken away, after the power had been shut off, after the line had been disconnected at the junction. A call from Ruth's number, lasting 7 seconds. No sound, no static, just open air. When Caroline asked the department for comment, they told her the call was an error, a system glitch. But the technician she spoke to, the one who had physically severed the line, swore that it couldn't have happened. "If the wire's cut," he said, "you don't get a dial tone. You don't get a line. You don't get anything." She published the article. It ran for 1 day in the back of the local section, and then it disappeared. The case has since become a footnote, an urban legend in some circles. A story told on ghost forums and late-night radio shows. But for the officers who worked that shift, for the dispatchers who picked up those calls, and for the woman who died alone in her house with her phone in hand, it was never a story. It was real. Real enough that, even now, retired officers remember her name. Real enough that no one ever bought the house again. It sat empty for years, then was razed, replaced by a duplex. But neighbors still claim that some nights, around midnight, you can hear a phone ringing. Not a cell phone, not a modern ringtone. A rotary bell, slow, sharp, metallic. 3 rings, then nothing. People always say the dead can't speak, that when life ends, the voice goes silent. But maybe that's not always true. Maybe sometimes the line stays open, just long enough for someone to be heard. This was the story of Ruth Lucille Snyder and the ghost who called the police. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. If you enjoyed this true story, join us next time, if you dare.